straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
You should never point it at something that you don't mean to destroy.
An inside look at the search warrant just days after Alec Baldwin fatally shoots a crew member on the set of his latest movie. And the trial for the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Law and Crime Daily host Brian Buckimire is live in Georgia with the latest on week 2 of jury selection. Plus, the state of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. Just days before trial is set to begin, the accused Kenosha shooter is back in the courtroom. And later, hate on trial. Jury selection begins in the civil suit of the 2017 Charlottesville riot. Details coming to light about the shooting by actor Alec Baldwin that left an up-and-coming cinematographer dead and a director wounded. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy's here with the search warrant that tells part of the story of what happened.
Jesse, this is the affidavit for that search warrant. It has information in it from people who saw what happened, including a man who said that Alec Baldwin was told the gun he was given was safe. Members of the movie industry gathered over the weekend to remember Helena Hutchins, killed on the set of the movie Rust in New Mexico.
Bonanza Creek Ranch has had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie set by a prop gun. We need help immediately.
The 911 call came after Alec Baldwin fired the gun that killed Hutchins and wounded director Joel Souza. According to an affidavit for a search warrant, the film's assistant director Dave Halls handed the weapon to Baldwin and yelled "cold gun," meaning the gun did not have live rounds. The affidavit also states Souza told investigators Baldwin was practicing cross-drawing the revolver when he heard what sounded like a whip and a loud pop. The shooting has raised questions about the use of guns on movie sets and how a live round could make it onto the set.
In the stage productions that I've worked with, they have a standing rule that you don't point the firearm directly at the other actor. You always aim it to the side.
Dick Storwald hasn't worked on a movie set, but is a firearms instructor.
In my opinion, there should be protocols involved that if the director hands a firearm to an actor and says cold, the actor should check it and also reply back cold, just as we did in our training.
Meanwhile, Sergei Zvetnoy, the movie's chief electrician, posted on Facebook saying he held Hutchins after she was wounded. He wrote the shooting was the result of negligence and unprofessionalism, questioning the experience of the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, who handed the gun to Dave Halls. He wrote to producers, "No saved penny is worth the life of the person." Now, Alec Baldwin actually tweeted after the shooting on Friday that he was cooperating fully with the investigation and had been in touch with Hutchinson's family. The affidavit, meanwhile, talks about a claim from one of the cameramen on the set who told investigators that Alec Baldwin was very careful with the gun. He even made sure when they were shooting another scene that a child was not in the way or nearby the gun when they were filming. The sheriff and the DA in Santa Fe County, New Mexico, where this happened, plan to hold a news conference on Wednesday morning, and we'll let you know what happens. Jesse?
All right, thanks, Anjanette. We're joined now by co-host Terry Austin and trial attorney Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, clearly something went wrong. There was a mistake, but the question is, could someone face criminal charges, Baldwin, anyone else? And if so, what could those charges be?
Absolutely, Jesse. This is definitely a sad case, and a sad case that's been heard throughout the country now about this sad mistake that took place. So what we have to distinguish is whether there will be criminal charges or whether there will be a civil lawsuit. Civil lawsuit, highly likely. I see that definitely that the victims in this case will definitely prevail. In regards to a criminal case, I see no criminal liability in regards at least to Alec Baldwin, because he was under the impression that the gun was a cold gun, meaning that it was not loaded. So there's no reason he would have had that the gun was loaded or would have acted in a reckless manner had the gun, had he known that the gun was loaded.
You know, Terry, we've seen something like this happen, you know, with Brandon Lee and the Crow. I mean, after this, how high profile it is, do you think that this incident will result in maybe stricter regulations for handling guns on film sets moving forward?
I do, Jesse. I think that there will be more stringent industry standards. Right now, it's not regulated by the federal government, but the industry really does have standards in place to prevent this type of accident. And they make sure that there are no live ammunition on the set and that they refrain from pointing a firearm at anyone unless you are aiming away from that individual. You're never supposed to place your hand or finger on that trigger unless it's time to actually point it. And you're supposed to be thoroughly brief and get an opportunity to actually look down the barrel of that gun. So I definitely think there will be some increased scrutiny after this.
And Jeanette, real quick, I heard there was some information about Assistant Director Dave Hall's and safety concerns. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, CNN was reporting that there had been complaints about Dave Hall's going back to 2019 involving 2 different productions. These were complaints that were apparently levied against him involving safety concerns with firearms and pyrotechnics. So that was from a member of the union that represents the prop makers, and she had issued a statement to CNN discussing those concerns.
Wow, so we're going to continue to monitor what happens in that situation, but it looks like something went wrong, and there's probably a lot of blame to go around. We'll continue to monitor it. Turning now to Florida, where we're told that Brian Laundrie's parents left their family home to mourn privately following the discovery of his remains. The Laundrie family attorney tells Law&Crime Network that Roberta and Chris Laundrie left their Northport home to mourn. A funeral will not be held for the 22-year-old. Last week, Laundrie's remains were found in Florida's Carlton Reserve following his disappearance in September. Laundrie's manner of death came back as inconclusive, but now a forensic anthropologist will study the remains to determine how Laundrie died. Laundrie's fiancée, Gabby Petito, went missing in August after the two traveled cross-country in their van. Her remains were found a week after Laundrie disappeared, and authorities say she died from strangulation. With little information about the circumstances of Petito's death, authorities say now that crime scenes, DNA evidence, and phone records could help solve the case. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the Kenosha shooter back in court.
It was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight.
We are going to make sure that we find justice in this case.
The 3 men charged will now stand trial.
I told him stop till he hit me. I had nothing to do. There's nothing else I can do.
You're a passerby coming through?
Nah, not necessarily.
That's my son that shot him. I was in the back of the truck.
Starting October 18th, watch live gavel-to-gavel coverage on the Law&Crime Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Monday marks the start of week 2 in the jury selection for the trial of the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Father and son duo Gregory and Travis McMichael and neighbor William Roddy Bryan are on trial for the death of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. In February 2020, Arbery was reportedly jogging near his Brunswick, Georgia home when the McMichaels began to tail him in a pickup truck. Eventually, Travis McMichael shot him, claiming self-defense. Bryan followed along in his own vehicle and recorded the incident on his cell phone. The video was later released, causing a national uproar. Arbery, a black man, was unarmed at the time of his death. All 3 defendants were indicted on a federal hate crime and face several state charges, including malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Outside the courthouse on Tuesday, civil rights activists called for respect for Arbery's father during the course of the trial.
This hostility towards Mr. Arbery really needs to stop. I mean, I know that he's trying to represent his client, but that doesn't mean you get hostile to a family member of somebody who has been killed. That is so inappropriate, and I have been greatly distressed by it because I've heard him lie before, saying a fact that's not true, and it happened again this morning.
For the latest on the trial, we turn now to Law&Crime Daily host Brian Buckimire, who's live in Georgia outside the Glynn County Courthouse. Brian, it's good to see you. It seems like jury selection for this trial could take quite a while. So how are things looking today as we begin week 2 of jury selection?
How's it going, Jesse? Yes, jury selection is looking like it's going to take quite some time to complete. But it started off with a bit of drama this morning as a prosecutor and defense began questioning jurors. One defense attorney said as a potential juror walked out, an African-American man, that Mr. Arbery, that is Ahmaud Arbery's father, gave a bit of a head nod to this juror. Now, we actually had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Arbery and two representatives from the Transformative Justice Coalition, and they spoke about how that was somewhat hurtful and that never occurred, and that they're trying to maybe plant the seed that Mr. Arbery is doing something improper. Also heard other questions that they kind of questioned, asking about what church people go to, what would they want from a juror if they were accused of this crime. But at the end of the day, Mr. Arbery spoke about the jury selection process thus far, both about how the defense was conducting themselves, sometimes not liking it as much as he would prefer, but also talking about the prosecution, how they were beginning to talk about the case in a way that he was proud of, and also finding that he was very confident in their overall carrying of this case.
Brian, there's these issues in terms of jury selection, people who know the defendants, whether or not they've already formed an opinion about this case. Now, we haven't heard this yet, but could a motion for a change of venue be on the table if we continue to run into these issues of finding a jury in this case?
I don't think so yet, Jesse. I don't think we're at that point. And the reason why I say that is why we are having a lot of trouble with jurors being struck. One was very interesting I found. Today he said that he's actually knows and is related to Mr. Arbery, the father of Ahmaud Arbery, and that William Rhodey Bryan sold him lawn equipment. So we talk about how close this community is. It's very interesting to see how they do know each other. But still, the question is whether or not they can be unbiased, whether or not they can put aside what they know and judge this case based on the facts and evidence and not what they hear outside the court.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear from Jason Sheffield, who represents Travis McMichael, and says he feels confident in getting a jury, and that, that an impartial jury, to say the least. That'll be interesting to see how the continuation of jury selection goes and how long it's going to go for. Brian, thanks so much. Hope you don't mind me keeping the seat warm for you until you get back. Thanks so much, Brian. Over now to California. The husband accused of contacting spellcasters to avoid a divorce now pleads not guilty to his wife's murder. All this as an arrest warrant states that 40-year-old Larry Millete choked his wife until she passed out and Googled date rape drugs before she went missing. 39-year-old May Millete, who went by the nickname Maya, went missing from her Chula Vista home in January. A body has never been found. Last Tuesday, her husband was arrested for her murder. On Thursday, he pled not guilty to one count of first-degree murder and another count of illegal possession of an assault weapon. According to the arrest warrant, Larry Millete murdered his wife after she sought a divorce. In a press conference, the San Diego County District Attorney says that the marriage was a, quote, toxic relationship, and that Larry had contacted so-called spellcasters that would magically erase their marital problems. Well, right now, Millete is being held without bail, and we're going to see if he tries to cast any more spells in this case. But coming up on Law and Crime Daily, 4 years after the deadly riots in Charlottesville, Virginia, jury selection is underway in the case's civil trial. Plus, Kyle Rittenhouse back in the courtroom just one short week before his trials to begin. What to expect as the long-awaited proceedings begin? That's next. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily, everybody. Accused Kenosha shooter Kyle Rittenhouse is back in court. This is just 1 week before jury selection is set to begin in his trial. Rittenhouse is charged with the deaths of Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber from the August 2020 protests that followed the Jacob Blake shooting. Officials say that the teenager wielded a rifle at the protesters, but his defense team claims that Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense that night. On Monday, attorneys for the prosecution and defense went back and forth debating over a witness. The defense planned to call Officer Amanda Franco, who took a statement from Kyle Rittenhouse ahead of the shooting. Both sides also argued over whether the jury needs to hear expert testimony from a use of force expert. Rittenhouse's trial is slated to begin on November 1st. Okay, let's talk about this. So, Bernarda, this will likely be the last time that we see Rittenhouse before next week's trial. What can we expect heading into jury selection in this very highly anticipated case?
Well, the decision that the judge makes in regards to whether a use of force expert will be able to testify on behalf of the defense is going to be very huge. The defense is going to have to structure their jury selection depending on whether a use of force expert will be allowed to testify. Because technically, if the defense is able to call a use of force expert to testify about why Rittenhouse took the actions that he did, then Kyle Rittenhouse will not need to testify on his own behalf. However, if the use of force expert is not allowed to testify, then Kyle Rittenhouse will have no other issue except to testify before the before the jury to determine whether he actually acted in self-defense and whether he was justified.
Well, Terry, do you think Kyle Rittenhouse will be able to successfully claim self-defense here?
That is really the key question, Jesse. And under Wisconsin law, you have the right to use deadly force for self-defense or defense of others, but you have to reasonably believe that you will be preventing your imminent death or great bodily harm. And so the question here, was this reasonable? So I do think experts should come in and talk about that. The video is going to be key. We're going to be able to see what exactly happened if that gets into the trial, and also what his state of mind was.
Yep, and with 3 victims here, it becomes a question, was it self-defense all across the board, or maybe just with one victim? We'll wait and see. It's definitely going to be a trial to watch. Well, the man convicted of murdering Michael Jordan's father will remain in prison after he was denied parole. Last Friday, the Parole Commission denied Daniel Green early release. It was the first time in 28 years that he was eligible. You might recall that Green and his co-defendant Larry Demery were convicted of James Jordan's murder in 1996. The pair have been filing motions for appeals ever since. The NBA star's father was missing for weeks before his body was found badly decomposed nearly 60 miles away from where he was last seen sleeping in his car. Green has maintained his innocence since 1993, claiming that he helped dispose of Jordan's body after Demery had killed him during an attempted robbery. Demery was granted parole last year, and he will be released from prison in 2024. When we come back, 4 years since the deadly protest in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the civil trial finally begins. What victims of the 2017 riots are calling for, and what's at stake for the defendants. And welcome back. Jury selection has wrapped in Florida for the man who's charged with the murder of Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Markeith Loyd was previously sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon. And while on the run for that killing, authorities say Loyd fatally shot Officer Deborah Clayton while she was in his pursuit in 2017. Prosecutors are now seeking the death penalty for this murder. Last Friday, Loyd asked the judge if he could represent himself during the trial, something he also requested during his first murder case. He claims that, quote, "things aren't getting done and it's my life on the line." The judge denied Loyd's request. Jury selection has lasted over 2 weeks after nearly hundreds of jurors had been narrowed down to 60, and the final 12 jurors and 4 alternates were chosen Monday afternoon. Over now to Virginia, jurors will decide whether the Unite the Right rally organizers conspired a violent uprising in the deadly riots. The so-called Unite the Right rally happened back in August 2017 when white supremacist groups gathered to demonstrate in Charlottesville, Virginia. All this was in response to the removal of Confederate symbols by local governments that followed the Charleston church shooting in 2015. Now, the protesters marched through Charlottesville chanting phrases like, quote, "Jews will not replace us," and "blood and soil." Virginia State Police eventually proclaimed the gathering to be an unlawful assembly. Hours later, a self-identified white supremacist rammed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters. One woman died and dozens of others were injured. 2 Virginia state troopers also died in a helicopter crash that was assisting with public safety. Now, 4 years after the deadly riots, the civil trial began on Monday. The 9 plaintiffs, including town residents and counter-protesters who were injured during that event, The lawsuit states that the organizers planned in advance to, quote, intimidate, harass, incite, and cause violence to people based on their race, religion, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Opening statements are expected to begin on Wednesday, and the trial is reported to last until November 19th. Okay, so Bernarda, we already saw a federal trial in 2018 that produced 2 life sentences for James Alex Fields Jr., the man who ran his car into the crowd. What's to gain now by going in the civil direction with the civil trial?
So right now with the civil trial, what it's doing, Jesse, is that it's sending a message. Hate is on trial. The First Amendment is on trial. By taking this case on a civil trial, what it's hoped to do is to actually bankrupt organizations such as these that like to incite riots that end up in harm to other people. So that is the hope in terms of deterrence of organizations like these that spill hate speech, tend to bankrupt them, and by bankrupting them, then we get rid of them.
So, Terry, I saw something a little unusual. The complaint in the case cites the Ku Klux Klan Act. What do the plaintiffs need to prove under that act?
You know, it's a Reconstruction era law, so it's a very old law, and it was really designed to halt the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War. And you can sue under that law for damages, and you have to allege conspiracy. And so in order to prevail, you have to show that there was an agreement between at least 2 people and that there was a common act. And so what the plaintiffs have to do here is to show that they conspired and that this was foreseeable. And there was some chatter about using a car to kill people. So I think they could argue that this was foreseeable. And frankly, they have about 5.3 terabytes of digital evidence. So it should go well.
Well, it's an interesting legal argument. It's going to be definitely a case to follow. Bernarda, Terry, thank you so much. Everyone out there, thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.